Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rome.
In our top story, the tides are turning in Gaza and Gazans are turning on their Hamas leaders. IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi announced that the IDF has encircled the last of the terror group's strongholds in the north and that Hamas is on the verge of collapse. More than 7,000 terrorists have been killed and hundreds of Hamas fighters have surrendered to the IDF. They are now providing valuable intelligence on the remaining terror infrastructure in the coastal enclave. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a message to the remaining Hamas terrorists operating in Gaza. He said it's over. Don't die for Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, but put down your weapons and surrender to IDF forces.
Israel may have to fight Hezbollah after it defeats Hamas. That's the message from National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi. The Lebanese-based terror group has fired hundreds of rockets into northern Israel, prompting the evacuation of 60,000 residents. Hanegbi said those residents cannot return to their homes until the threat from the Iranian-backed militia is neutralized. He insisted that Israel will have to act to ensure that residents of the north are no longer displaced in their land. Hanegbi stressed that Israel is not interested in war in the north, but we will have no alternative other than to impose a new reality if Hezbollah remains a threat.
The Palestinian Authority continues to show its support for terror and is lobbying to save its rival, Hamas. PA Prime Minister Mohammed Shayeta said that Ramallah rejects Israel's directive to wipe out the Iranian-backed terror group, which perpetrated the gruesome massacre of 1,200 people and the kidnapping of 240 to Gaza on October 7th. He said that the terror group is an integral part of the Palestinian mosaic. The PA official was speaking at the Doha Forum, where he lobbied Qatar to reallocate funds earmarked for Hamas to the PA and said that the group must form a unity government in Gaza after the war. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded to Shayeta saying, "There will be no Hamas. We will eliminate it." He said the very fact that the PA proposed to unite with the Iranian-backed terror group further strengthens his policy that the Palestinian Authority is also not the solution.
U.S. President Joe Biden has pledged to support Israel and to provide it with weapons until the Hamas terror group is destroyed. His comments came at a Hanukkah candle-lighting ceremony at the White House. Biden said, "My commitment to the safety of the Jewish people and the security of Israel and its right to exist as an independent Jewish state is unshakable." This comes as U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken reiterated that Jerusalem, and not Washington, will decide when the conflict with Hamas in Gaza is completed. This clarification was announced amid reports that the White House was pressuring Israel to wrap up the Gaza operation.
More than 70 U.S. lawmakers have signed on to a letter demanding the ousting of the heads of 3 major American universities after a congressional hearing on anti-Semitism proved their complicity in Jew hatred on campus. The heads of the University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, and MIT recently testified before the House Education Committee and were questioned by Representative Elise Stefanik on whether calls for the genocide of Jews is considered bullying and harassment under the college's codes of conduct. Liz McGill, the president of the University of Pennsylvania, shocked the panel by responding that it is a context-dependent decision. Stefanik and her colleague Jared Moskowitz were the main signatories on the letter, which states there is no context in which calls for the genocide of the Jews are acceptable rhetoric. The failure to unequivocally condemn calls for the systematic murder of Jews is deeply alarming. It stands in sharp contrast to the principles we expect leaders of top academic institutions to uphold. Liz McGill, the president of the University of Pennsylvania, has already resigned from her position, and there are increasing demands for the other universities' heads to resign as well.
The Biden administration has condemned shocking anti-Semitic comments from the leader of CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. The White House has removed the incendiary group from its national panel on anti-Semitism. CARE's inclusion in the forum was highly controversial due to its long history of outspoken Jew hatred. CARE publicly blamed Israel for the October 7th attacks and denounced the Jewish state for the war against Hamas in Gaza. Niaid Awad, the group's national executive director, declared that the people of Gaza have a right to self-defense, but Israel does not. White House Deputy Spokesman Andrew Bates said President Biden condemns the shocking anti-Semitic statements of CARE's executive director in the strongest terms.
Israel's national intelligence agency, the Mossad, assisted local authorities in thwarting an Iranian attack against Israelis in Cyprus. A joint statement released by the Israeli Prime Minister's office, the National Security Council, and the Mossad confirmed that Cypriot authorities arrested 2 Iranian nationals in connection with the plot. Both reportedly hold ties to the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. This comes as Israel heightened travel warnings to 80 countries around the world in response to increased calls from Tehran to target Israelis and Jews abroad.
Iranian-backed Houthi rebels continue to wreak havoc in the Red Sea and have increased their threat to attack any ship bound for Israel. The Yemeni-based pirate army has hijacked ships and attacked several boats with Iranian-made suicide drones. The United States Central Command dispatched the USS Carney to the region, which has fended off several ballistic missile attacks on commercial vessels in the waters. However, a Norwegian oil and chemical tanker was hit with an anti-ship cruise missile at the strategic shipping choke point in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. CENTCOM confirmed the attack originated from a Houthi-controlled area in Yemen.
The Shoah Foundation, founded by legendary director Steven Spielberg, has launched a project to document the atrocities committed by the Hamas terror group in Israel on October 7th. Spielberg started this important project in 1994 to record the video testimonies of Jews who survived the Holocaust. It has become the world's largest video collection of survivor and witness testimony. Now the organization is working with production teams on the ground in Israel to catalog the Hamas massacres. So far, more than 130 victims have provided their testimonies, which will be available on the Visual History Archive in the USC Shoah Foundation's Countering Anti-Semitism Through Testimony collection. Spielberg explained that both initiatives, recording interviews with survivors of the October 7th attacks and the ongoing collection of Holocaust testimony, seek to fulfill our promise to survivors, that their stories would be recorded and shared in the effort to preserve history and work towards a world without any anti-Semitism or hate of any kind.
Anti-Semitism is at an all-time high. The Anti-Defamation League reported that anti-Jewish incidents spiked 337% in the United States since the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel. The organization noted that Jew hatred has also skyrocketed around the world. Australia has seen a nearly 600% increase in anti-Semitism, and there have been over 1,500 anti-Jewish incidents in the United Kingdom. And in a related story, a troubling new poll reflects that 20% of young Americans believe the Holocaust is a myth. The survey, conducted by The Economist, shows that 1 in 5 Americans aged 18 to 29 believe that the Jewish genocide did not happen. 16% of this age group believe that Jews have too much influence in the United States, and 28% believe that Jews have too much power in general.
The Israel Allies Foundation hosted a delegation of Brazilian parliamentarians in Jerusalem. This was the first high-level delegation of Latin American government leaders since the October 7th attacks on the Jewish state. The group was hosted in the Knesset, where they met with members of the Israeli government and conveyed their support despite recent comments made by Brazil's president. Senator Carlos Viana said, "We want to make it clear to the people of Israel that we do not agree with the recent statements made by President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in his view of the state of Israel and the Hamas terror group. We assert that Israel has the right to defend itself and to exist." The delegation traveled to the Gaza envelope to witness firsthand the massacres that were perpetrated by the Iranian-backed Hamas terror group. Josh Reinstein, the president of the Israel Allies Foundation, said, "This show of solidarity from Brazilian members of Congress reflects the importance of faith-based diplomacy. It is an honor to host the delegation, and we are confident that this critical visit will strengthen the alliance between our two countries."
Archaeologists with the Israel Antiquities Authority and Tel Aviv University have uncovered ceramic roofing tiles dating to the Greek Seleucid king Antiochus. The discovery was announced during Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, which celebrates the Jewish victory over the Hellenistic army. These 16 tiles, discovered in the city of David in Jerusalem, are the oldest ever found in the land of Israel. Dr. Filip Vukosavovich from the IAA explained that the tiles provide tangible remains of the Seleucid Greek presence in the region, linking us with the story of Hanukkah. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Amit Halevi. He's a member of Knesset from the Likud party. Amit, thank you for being on the show.
Hi, Josh. Thank you.
Well, we're well into the battle. It's been going on for well over a month now. How do you think it's going from a general point of view?
First of all, we must understand what is the battle about. And we are fighting, Josh, for the truth. I mean, what is this war all about? It's not about Gaza. Actually, it's not about Jerusalem. It's about the truth. And the truth is, as you well know, what is written in the Bible more than one time, that the land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. This is the truth. This is the cause of the fight. I mean, what we have in the other side is the radical Muslim that actually divide the whole world, the whole globe, to two parts. Dar el-Islam, the area of the every square that the Muslim ever took over, ever controlled, and the Dar el-Harb, which means the area that there will be war, and of course, in their eyes, they will win and they will take over this area. There is no other border in the Muslim vision, in the radical Muslim vision. There is no other border, one border between Dar el-Islam to Dar el-Harb. So Jerusalem, Gaza, and the land of Israel, which is, they consider it to be part of Dar el-Islam, because as you know, since the 7th century, for 1400 years, actually the Muslims actually occupied the Middle East and half of Europe. So they said this is Muslim land. That was cruel occupation, and this is what we are fighting for the truth. What is if the radical Muslim will take over not only Gaza and Jerusalem, but Rome and Paris and London and Washington, and you can see the demonstrations in all those capitals.
You know, at the outset of the war, you gave a Churchillian speech from the Knesset plenum where you said that we can't fight this war with one hand tied behind our back. We need to fight it like other countries fight wars. We need to put aside the fact that they're using civilians as human guards and fight with all we have. Now that we're over a month into the war, have we done that, or are we still fighting with one arm tied behind our back?
Unfortunately, the answer is no. And I ask you and the audience, would Churchill and Truman, if you can imagine Truman or Churchill give humanitarian aid to the Nazis in Germany? One track, two track, we're talking about hundreds of tracks. It's horrible. It's unbelievable. Unfortunately, I'm, of course, part of the coalition in Israel. I think that the pressure from Washington must be stopped. And we should behave exactly, by the way, as the Americans did all over the 20, 30 years, that, in the global war with the terror, with the global terror, that the United States under Obama administration, under Bush administration, under Clinton administration, and even under Biden administration, fighting the terror include villages that were totally destroyed in Iraq, in Afghanistan. We're talking about 40,000 kids. And you know why? Because Truman and Churchill actually set these rules after the war. We're talking about 1949, the Geneva Convention that said exactly that, as you said, that civilians, civic institutions cannot be, cover to military forces of the enemy. And that's exactly what the free world did in Europe after the Second World War. That's what Israel need to do, because, again, we are not we have no business, with fighters with guns. We have business with Nazi ideology. And if the free world, will not understand that Israel is only in the front line of the whole free world, so we will lose this war.
October 7th was 2 months ago, and we're still in this war. What's the goal? It doesn't make sense that if we wipe out Hamas and we still have Hezbollah on our northern border, it doesn't make sense if we wipe out Hamas and Hezbollah and we still have a nuclear Iran. So where is this heading?
First of all, you touched the head of the octopus. I mean, he is in Tehran. And the Shia vision is actually the vision of all these proxies. It's all one shot. I mean, it's all one plan. And look, Israel wake up after 7 of October to, I hope, to different view on the area, and again on the whole world. And the bottom line should be every place that this ideology, this way of education, of culture, not only weapons, but culture. What we have in Gaza is 2 million people, all of them Jewish, most of them, let's say 1.5 million of them, were educated in Hamas educational system. When they came to Be'eri and to Kfar Aza villages, our villages, they didn't see women. They didn't see human being. Every place like this should be destroyed. I mean, game over. Israel cannot allow itself in the short term, in the long term. I mean, maybe it will take time, but in the long term, Israel should not allow itself a terror state like Hamas and Hezbollah near its border.
I mean, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
This is a war against our Judeo-Christian civilizations. Our biblical values are under attack. Please, every one of you, participate this war against the barbarian, radical Muslim, and we will have a great victory for our future, for our children's future.
Thank you, Amit, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
And now, the truth from Zion.
The United Nations clearly has a problem. It has failed miserably when it comes to dealing with Iran. The fanatic Shiite regime funnels millions of dollars into propping up terror groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran terrorizes its own population and robs them of freedoms and basic human rights. Yet the United Nations does not stand up to the leaders of Iran. In fact, it gives them legitimacy by offering this radical Islamic theocracy roles within the UN that impact global society. Women in Iran are fighting for basic rights, and they are at risk of death if they violate strict Sharia religious law. And yet Iran was a member of the United Nations Women's Rights Commission. The regime entered the commission in 2021, but was removed due to wide-scale protests from watchdog groups and individuals. They pressured the UN to hold a vote regarding Iran's status on the commission. The measure to remove Iran from the delegation passed by a margin of 29-8, the first time the Commission has ever taken such action. In the last election held in 2021, Iran's Guardian Council, appointed by Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, disqualified prominent candidates. This ensured that presidential incumbent Ibrahim Raisi would have an easy victory. When Iran implemented its new hijab legislation, the UN called it gender apartheid, but took no meaningful action. The new Iranian law imposes even longer prison sentences and higher monetary penalties for women who do not comply with the country's strict Islamic dress code. In September 2022, the tragic death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini brought to light the harsh reality that Iranian women face on a daily basis. Amini was arrested by the morality police for not covering her hair properly. She was beaten to death by police while in custody. Just over a year later, the United Nations appointed Iran to chair the UN Human Rights Forum. The role of this two-day conclave was to discuss human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, where countries can work to protect individuals from discrimination and ensure equal access to justice for all. The move drew harsh criticism from politicians and diplomats around the world. Calls to overturn Iran's chairmanship of the Human Rights Forum were ignored. The meeting was held as scheduled, but very few member states attended. The only speakers to participate were from China, Cuba, and Venezuela. U.S. Representative Claudia Tenney tweeted that naming Iran as chair of the UN Human Rights Forum is like calling an arsonist to put out a fire. She added that it shows just how broken the Human Rights Council is today. The move highlights broader concerns about Iran's approach to human rights. The United Nations as an organization was founded on the principles of human rights and equality, and yet has not dealt with Iran for its mass persecution of demonstrators. Nearly 20,000 people were arrested during protest in support of women's rights and public freedom. Human rights groups claim more than 500 people were killed during the violent suppression of demonstrations.
And today, unfortunately, with these awful, unbelievable violations of the basic human rights in Iran, and when most of the people of Iran are ready and want the change of the regime, the West keeps speaking about engaging with the regime, appeasing the regime, and not fighting against this regime.
Sadly, demands that Iranian authorities end their crackdown and deliver justice and accountability fell on deaf ears. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action Accord, or JCPOA, allowed Iran to work on its nuclear program under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency. But when UN monitors traveled to Iran, they were not permitted to inspect nuclear facilities. The UN responded by doing nothing. Iran's nuclear program is a matter of grave concern for global security. However, the international community routinely acts ambivalently about the idea of Iran possessing nuclear weapons. The UN shows little concern regarding the threat posed by the Islamic Republic of Iran, but is obsessed with the Jewish state. So much so that the UN Human Rights Council established an unprecedented and permanent commission of inquiry to delegitimize Israel. The organization always reviews and criticizes Israel at every meeting. Iran, which beats and poisons women for peacefully protesting, does not have a standing agenda. Only Israel is singled out in this obviously biased manner. It's time for the United Nations to live up to its founding principles and hold those who violate human rights accountable. Up next, the ICJ Report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Shalom everybody, I'm coming to you from Kibbutz Be'eri. This is just a few hundred meters away from the Gaza Strip. And on October 7, here in this community, as you see, Hamas terrorists entered that community. They killed 10% of the population here, and a very similar carnage took place in many other communities around the Gaza Strip. People who lived here, you can see they have been traumatized. It used to be a paradise on earth, they called it. It used to be a place where young families from all over Israel decided to come and move here because it was such a paradisaic or such a beautiful way to live here. And today this is an empty place, a place of destruction. All the families that were living here, they moved out from Kibbutz Be'eri, and they are today evacuees spread all across Israel. The Christian Embassy is here on the ground in Israel to help the people who were traumatized by this incredible carnage. And we want you to look at what the Christian Embassy is doing in order to help the residents of this war-stricken community here in Israel.
In these very difficult and painful days, ICJ is here on the ground in Haifa with some of our staff from Jerusalem and from Haifa representing many different countries in order to stand with Israel. They do it in a very practical way today. We're just packing all kinds of toys that we will bring soon to places where evacuees are from the south. Haifa actually took many in from the south, and they're staying in all kinds of places in different schools, and the people came with nothing, and there are many children. So we want to give a little bit of joy to the children today when we go soon, to bring it to them, to bring those toys, and we want to stand with Israel in this very, very difficult time and we want to be your hands and feet. I'm sure you would love to have been here and do something, but you can. Just fill our hands so we can continue to do the work that we need to do also in the time to come. We're here with the ICJ in Haifa and giving food and drinks to these wonderful people, a family from Ashkelon, and support them and stand with them at this very difficult time.
We brought a team from the Christian Embassy here today to Kibbutz Shefayim along the central Israeli coast. It's a beautiful, flourishing setting here, this kibbutz. But they've taken in the survivors, 135 families from Kfar Aza, this fellow kibbutz on the Gaza border, which is one of the worst hit of all the communities there. And we've come to talk to some of them and meet them and help them out.
It's been so devastating, really, David, hasn't it, to hear the stories. Our hearts are so grieved together with the people at this time. And we want to do something practical to assist. We know that there's so much that's going to need to be done. But today we brought encouragement and practical help for those who have lost their homes. Their lives are shattered. They came here, many of them, with just the clothes on their back. And so today we're going to be giving out practical assistance so that they can go and meet some of those basic needs. And that's just the beginning. We promised today, didn't we, David? We're going to stand with them and we're going to help them rebuild their lives.
I believe you have been touched like me to see the need of those Israelis that have been living here in this area and are spread all over Israel. They really need your help. They need your help to rebuild their lives. They need your help to deal with the trauma that they experienced here in this war-stricken community. And we just ask you to prayerfully consider to stand with the Christian Embassy as we are standing with the evacuees here, not only from Kibbutz Be'eri, but the entire Gaza envelope communities. I look forward to hearing from you. God bless you. Hear from the Gaza envelope communities.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.